Welcome the new attendees who are joining. Thank you all so much for joining us. We keep hearing the bell ringing. So we are excited to get started with our session 2. We now have a panel discussion focusing on driving organizational change through DEI Technology. And I'm going to try to say your name correctly. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's Shrikant Pattathil from Harbinger Systems. Did I get your name right?
Yes, you got it right.
All right, welcome.
Angela, thank you. So welcome everyone. Today, like Angela mentioned, our topic is driving organizational change through DEI technology. We have Rocki and Everton with us as panelists. I don't know, I can see Everton, but I'm not sure if Rocki has joined yet. But we'll
yes,
welcome
she's
them
here.
briefly. Hi, Rocki. We'll welcome you briefly. Maybe I'll just give you a quick overview to the topic that we are going to talk about today, and then move into some questions and discussions. So basically, the whole concept of workforce and workplace, as we know, is kind of drastically changing. It's transforming. A few years back, we were all grappling about gig. And I think in the last year and a half, it's been all about remote workforce. And then this whole thing about DEI getting a lot of focus and attention. And so therefore, DEI initiatives with this complex workflows is becoming and workplace is becoming very, challenging to manage. And therefore, technology is going to be an important driver. So overall, in today's session, we'll touch upon why it's gaining so much importance lately. What does it mean from a strategy perspective for businesses? What approaches are organizations taking? We'll hear some examples of that from our panelists, and if audience wants to contribute, you're welcome as well. And how emerging technologies are going to aid some of these initiatives that organizations are undertaking when it comes to the DEI strategy. So DEI topic being pretty vast, I think we'll focus today's discussion on the strategy and technology aspects of it. Things like, there are a lot of platforms out there. There are people implementing internal tools, the whole implementation, and how it's kind of messaged around in the organization, the whole ROI of DEI. We probably may not have enough time to touch on some of these topics, but welcome if you want to share some thoughts. But overall, from our discussion and questions perspective, we are going to focus on strategy and technology. So 3 parts, we'll do the presentation. One, we'll talk about the business imperatives, then talk about the tech landscape, and then talk about pros and cons of emerging tech. So starting with DEI and the business imperative. So basically, from a business standpoint, it's gaining a lot of importance, and we all know about it. And that's why we have a session in HRTech also exclusively talking about DEI. Business leaders are recognizing how discrimination, harassment, toxic work cultures are negatively impacting their brand, and therefore their ability to attract talent and then financially be viable as a company. And every study that has been done recently and the session before talked about belonging. And so it's not about employee engagement, but it's about belonging. And that's the #1 driver when it comes to employee satisfaction. So I'm sure we'll have some perspectives on that as we move forward. Various studies that McKinsey, Deloitte, Catalyst, etc. have done in the recent past, they have said that people who have diverse boards, diverse teams, are more competent, and the business is more viable and sustainable and profitable long term. And so those are some of the business reasons that come to mind. And of course, there can be some concrete examples that we can.
We lost you.
Other key driver, why some of the business reasons at times, and therefore things like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, Time's Up, these have been some key drivers in the overall, adoption and focus on DEI technology. Very quickly, at Harbinger, we just don't build technology, but we also take DEI very. It's one of our core values. We most of our team is based out of India. We have a 700 people team. And India, is diverse by itself. Every state is different, speaks different languages and so forth. So over 30 years, we have had some process. Now we are trying to use technology to enable some of our DEI initiatives as the workforce is going to be remote. And some of our recent initiatives have been very successful. We have been, in the industry, we have been recognized. So I wanted to share some of that. And, it's a positive thing for our HR team and others to be recognized. And on this note, I think I've finished my introduction part of the topic. So let's go ahead and welcome our panelists and hear from them about their interests in this specific topic, and also a little bit about their background, starting with Rocki, our Chief Diversity Officer, SmartRecruiters. Rocki, you want to go first?
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Rocki Howard. I am the Chief Diversity Officer at SmartRecruiters. I identify as she, her, Black, Christian, Gen X, wife, mom, because I actually believe that those are all dimensions of my diversity, and they're how I show up in the world. And they absolutely inform my perspective of everything that I do and the lens of which I look through the world. And ultimately, when you think about why diversity is important to me, that should probably tell you all that you need to know. I'm also part of Gen X, right? I've built my career in recruiting. So I've spent 30 years in recruiting. You name it, I've done it, including running large global teams with people in, direct reports and indirect of over 200, operationally in 4 different countries. Along the way, as a woman, as a Black woman, as now a woman over 50, as a Christian, I wanted to see people that were like me in the workplace. I also have some other dimensions of diversity. I came from a pretty low social economic status. I dropped out of college. I didn't have the privilege that a lot of executives have to make it through that track. And because of all of those things, I wanted to give those opportunities to others. So as I grew through leadership, I sought to infuse diversity into the cultures of which I work. I sought to work with big global clients and help them to improve their diversity initiatives, because I also fundamentally believe that when you change the lives of the underrepresented, you change the world, right? And I get up in the morning to change the world. And I believe we can do that through the actions that we take as individuals and within the scope of the work that we do. And that's why it's important to me. I think there's another piece of this too. I think as we talk about tech today, and we, as a Chief Diversity Officer, I spend quite a bit of time working on systemic change. And that systemic change is necessary and required. But I also feel like we don't spend enough time talking about the human parts of diversity. The ultimate answer for why this is important to us should be because it's the right thing, because it shouldn't be so doggone hard to show up in the world and just be yourself and have your traits and your skills appreciated and accepted. And so I'm also the host of the Voices of Diversity podcast, which allows you to be able to hear the stories of people who identify as being underrepresented and what their experiences have been like in corporate. Because I think fundamentally, people still think that this is something that happens to other people or it's an exception. And we need to help people understand multiple dimensions of diversity and the challenges that happen with multiple dimensions of diversity. And I'm really blessed to be able to be a voice to that. So that's kind of my story. and why it's important to me. And it's a perfect transition to Everton, because I think if you're on Diversitypop, you can occasionally find an episode of the Voices of Diversity podcast. So
Thanks, Rocki. Over to you, Everton.
Thank you, Rocki. And first of all, thank you for this opportunity to be in front of you all today on a Zoom call. You know, I do miss the days we saw each other face to face in a conference room. So I'll tell you, I'm old school in that regard, but I know technology is here. And so we embrace this Zoom opportunity. A little quick background on myself. I too come from a huge diversity background, as you can tell. I'm Black, according to the description used for race. But I know I'm brown. I know my colors. At the end of the day, though, my immigrant story is really what defines me. I'm an immigrant from Jamaica. My parents immigrated to the U.S. when I was 9 years old. In Jamaica, one of our country's motto is "Out of many, one people." And if those of you have vacationed to that small little island, you will see Indians, Chinese, whites, Blacks. You see diversity. And so I grew up with diversity from day one and experienced it in a positive way and also in a learning way. Came to the US. For me, it's my military experience where I got the opportunity to attend West Point, to become an Army officer and also to serve for the United States military. And for me, that spirit of belonging was day one. When you join the military in the US, you belong. You volunteer, is that belonging is an equation you volunteer. So belonging, you need to make yourself belong. But that spirit of belonging was crucial for that, let's say, formative years, because, you know, unfortunately, I was also part of the Gulf War. And I say unfortunately because war changes people. It changes your thinking very quickly. And on the battlefield, you do not think about diversity. You think the enemy and your friends and your colleagues and your soldiers and your, you know, and your country. And so for me, this thing goes beyond just the conversation today, because I spent the rest of my time after I left the military, almost 25 years, in corporate America, where I saw and was part of diversity topics, ERGs, part of also taking that annual training. And all those things I felt were all important, but it really didn't move the needle in my perspective. So strategically, organizations were spending a lot of time and effort building out the capabilities to drive diversity and, more importantly, make people feel like they belong. But I think we hit the mark over the years because we put the onus on learning or training, you know, or a person, HR or department. My only solution to this is not just about technology. We're human beings here. This is not a technology solution. Yes, we can use technology to help us and aid us in that effort, but this is really about a human solution. Diversity for me is the world. It's this Zoom call. I see everyone here, different faces, different places and backgrounds, and we all come from it. That's the world. It's a given. Equity, right? It's a numbers game. We can fix that. I get 5, you get 5. We can fix the numbers. We can be transparent with the numbers. Inclusion is a leadership trait. That can be trained. That can be developed over time. We know that leaders that are intentional bring people in. They don't call people out. That's what we can work on with our technology. We can help people grow that instincts. And that belonging, as we touched on earlier, that's the outcome. We want people to feel like they belong. I want to feel like I belong to this group here, not because I got invited, because you guys welcome me because of who I am. So I'm grateful and I'm happy to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Everton. That's a great background you have, and thanks, Rocki, also for the introduction. I'm sure from your background, recruitment training as well, you will have examples to share of how you are experiencing some of the diversity technology that's getting adopted in the industry. And I'm sure we will also touch upon the social and human aspects of during the course of our discussion. So moving forward to our next section. Which is about, looking at the market. And I think most of you are interested in how DEI technology is gaining momentum. So one perspective we thought might be interesting is to look at how the vendor landscape has evolved over the years. And we looked at several reports, and one interesting report was the Redford Mercer research, where specifically the focus was on DEI tech vendors. The DEI tech market, if you take it exclusively, it's still pretty small. Probably as of 2018, it was about 100 million, and growing compared to other markets. And most of the vendors in the space are in the last 4 to 6 years. They're not vendors. They've been working in this industry for 20 years or 30 years. So it's a pretty nascent market from that way. However, in the last year or so, at least 25% of them have grown 100% year on year. That means that there's a lot of adoption that is happening in the industry. And so from a vendor perspective, if you look at it, it seems like there is investment happening. There seems like there's growth happening, and this space itself is creating its own identity. It's within HRTech by itself. So that's what the data tells us, and that's what I wanted to share. And at this point, also ask our panelists, maybe starting with Everton this time first. What is your perspective? Are you seeing this DEI technology becoming mainstream? What's been your experience?
Oh, great. So again, I didn't do a plug for my company, and I won't, because I want you guys to check it out on your own, make your own assessment. But a great question, Shrikant. For me, I see technology becoming very much embraced in this space. It's a great opportunity now. We have some really good tools out there. We have a platform that's ubiquitous. That's our mobile device. It's everywhere. We carry it around everywhere we go, and probably can't put it down enough. If we can take advantage of this platform from a technology standpoint and put some really good learnings on the platform, I think this is where the D&I conversation can take place in any place, wherever you're at. And we've seen some companies like ourselves that are embracing this technology platform and to communicate to employees virtually, or say on a mobility standpoint. And we know people are obviously working in capacities where they're not sitting in front of their desktop. So again, mobile devices like your phones, iPhone or Android device are where the technology is meeting us. Now the content becomes a question. There's a lot of good content out there. It's hard to find. When I say hard to find, it's hard to find because there's so much noise. And so again, we pride ourselves in finding the best content. Rocki, plug for you. You've given us some really good content in your initiative that you're working on, and there's others that are key to the space to bring content where it makes sense. And we've built a platform where this content can exist in whatever modalities make sense for people to learn, whether they're learning from watching a video, listening to a podcast, or like the old school way, reading, which I like to do. But technology can definitely help facilitate and help kind of drive this inclusion instincts that I mentioned earlier.
Everton, just a follow-up question on that. Are you seeing people, since you have a DEI platform, a technology, you are very narrowly focused on the space. Are you seeing customers coming to you, or you're still having to go out and educate the market?
Great question, Shrikant. We are a new entrant, early startup, and I say early because we've been getting the word out with friends and family, and say Rocki's a friend. Clearly there's companies that we're working with in this space. So early state in terms of getting the word out, but this medium obviously helped us in that effort. We are seeing companies embracing it. One, because, and it goes across any sector. If you have people, Diversitypop is the platform for you. So we cover all sectors. Where it comes a kind of a conversation now with the chief diversity officers or the folks, the CEOs of organizations that are looking to make a DNA change, it's how do you apply this platform in your overall strategic efforts, your overall D&I efforts? Because again, this platform provides a solution it's only one solution to this challenge. It's not a cure. There's a lot more we can do. Rocki, maybe
Yeah.
Rocki could. Yeah.
I want to address what you said about noise, because so certainly I think the desire to have tech solve the DEIB problem is voracious. So when you think about, is it becoming mainstream now? Absolutely. You're seeing much more appetite for, how do I use technology to help me solve this problem? Let me tell you guys this trick. Tech is not going to solve diversity issues. It's not a tech issue. Tech needs to be a tool in our toolbox to help us walk through all of the intersections where bias comes up, right? So if you think about what my organization does, we are what you all would probably know as an applicant tracking system. And so when people apply and go through the applicant process for companies, there's several steps along that way. And so what I'm starting to see our clients ask us for is not only how do we iterate, one, how do our current features support their diversity initiatives? That's number one. So there's much more of an appetite for that. What other technology can we use to help along that process, to help mitigate bias and to help us drive our initiatives and drive a great candidate experience for all types of diverse candidates, right? So people are hungry for this. The challenge, in my opinion, is that, to Everton's point, there's a lot of noise out there and there's a lot of imposters. So people are doing things like, oh, all right, well, I have this product, and so I'm just going to put diversity over it and sell it. And what's happening is because we're still, as corporate America, trying to figure out how we evolve diversity and the thoughts around diversity, we'll buy it because it looks like it's going to work or help. And so I think it is absolutely mainstream now to be looking for technology to be able to help us move forward and drive forward the agenda. I think holistically, we have to do that in conjunction with understanding what it takes to actually be able to do that. And our point of view at SmartRecruiters is that, hiring diverse talent sits on 4 core pillars of success. It's diversity, brand equity, fair hiring processes, strategic sourcing, and organizational support. And so we're seeing technology that can come help with all of those particular items along that pathway.
Yep.
A great point, Rocki, about how a platform like SmartRecruiters is also thinking about diversity and inclusion. It's not the play is not only for niche platforms, but even the large platforms have to enable and facilitate diversity and inclusion within their scope.
Absolutely. And when you think of like an organization like SmartRecruiters, and this is, excuse me, a unique value prop, I think, for us and our platform, but our platform has a marketplace. And so what that a marketplace allows you to be able to do is to say, when it's not built natively into our technology, what we will do is we build integrations to other providers that can help support you with that. And so it's not only how do we look at our product roadmap and how do we evolve it as a tech company, but where do we partner with those niche providers, especially in the DEI world, and connect them to our customers and clients. Because ultimately, look, I'd love to work myself out of a job. I'd love to live in a world where we don't need CEOs. And so this is not about any one kind of company cornering the market. It's how do we crowdsource together to help organizations make progress.
Absolutely. And if I can just build on Rocki's this amazing comment, because clearly there's recruiting is the day one you bring an employee in, but again you need to bring them in safely when they're in there safely. So the technology we put forward clearly has to bring that level of safety for that learning. Not training. I said that learning, and so that priding ourselves and Diversitypop, one of our value proposition, unique value proposition is this: it's anonymized learning. It does not ask you for your personalized information. We know today data privacy is probably the #1 issue plaguing a lot of these social platforms, all these technology solutions. People don't feel safe with their data. Who's watching them? What are you looking at? So we took that seriously in our development of this platform, on our technology platform. It became one of our key tenets for people to learn in full anonymity. And when you can learn safely, you can learn your best. You can really expand your curiosity. You can put yourself in a good place. When you're feeling tracked and everybody knows what you're doing and what you're looking at, you're going to give them what they want to hear. So again, technology could be our friend in this space or our worst enemy. And we know what the worst enemy looks like. Just go look at the social platforms that are out there creating all this garbage and noise.
A great point, Everton, on the noise part. Maybe we'll focus a little bit there on in depth as we move forward. So let me kind of move us a little bit ahead. When it comes to applications of DEI technology, and I think Everton, Rocki, you also alluded to some of it. Talent acquisition, performance management, learning culture, probably the main in the forefront when it comes to adopting DEI in some way. So be it from candidate screening and extending all the way through skills assessments, interview callbacks, there is HR and DEI technology in existing platforms that help you promote fair, unbiased recruiting methodologies. When it comes to performance management, the whole continuous performance and goal-based judgment without waiting for 6 months or 12 months appraisal cycles helps you, convey information and feedback which is more unbiased. And also this whole learning culture that companies are trying to adopt, be it micro-learning or other forms of anonymized learning like Everton referred to, is also driving the employee engagement. And that's probably happening across the organization. However, it's when you measure success, I think it is the strategic diversity that that companies are looking at. It's not in isolation or it's not in pockets. It's when the entire organization is diverse and inclusive. That's when you really see, unbiased assessments, promotions, coaching, all sorts of professional development and things happening within the organization. And analytics is probably going to be the key driver in all of these things. And that's one thing that I think is enabling it and is also driving it. And there will be a overall focus on getting better at analytics from always. So before I move in and put forth the next question, I also wanted to look at how the DEI technology is being enabled or adopted in organizations. What are the options that people have? One is to look at DEI as an exclusive problem, and be it in talent acquisition, recruitment, and look at special vendors that can solve the problem. And there, I mean, what Everton is doing is exactly that. I mean, focused on the diversity and inclusivity problem, and then build a product which specifically addresses that need. And then there are large platforms, which also need to play in, and because they are already implemented and adopted in organizations, they have to support the whole DEI aspirations of the organization. So they are also building features which enable it, enable that whole process. And last but not the least, organizations also have to think about themselves. There may be certain workflows, certain processes, certain cultural diversity that they have or challenges that they have in the workforce where they may not have tools. So they may have to build it themselves. So be it a recommendation or a networking suggestion app or something that within their organization, which is very specific and takes into account the analytics that is generated within the organization, might be something that they are specifically looking at. So all this is kind of what is enabling. So at this point, let me bring in our panelists once again and ask them this question, saying that, what do you think is the best approach that organizations that are probably just stepping in and looking to do more on DEI, should they build something themselves to really accelerate that progress? Should they buy ready-made technology, or they should look at integration? I mean, having all the technologies integrate, build better analytics. So what would be your thought process and suggestion based on your experience with some of your customers? Going with Rocki first.
First of all, I think a lot of companies are doing this because there's this desperate need to have like a checklist and to take an action. So the first thing I would always recommend is that you take a step back and you really think about, for your organization, what is your DEIB strategy? What does success look like in your organization? What dimensions of diversity are you focused on? What organizational accountability do you want to build in? Don't compare yourself to, big giant company over here who you may see externally facing looking like they're doing DEI really well. Trust me, nobody's doing it really well. We're all trying to figure it out right now. So I think it's important first, before you go and determine a technology roadmap, for you to actually have a strategy and a roadmap. What I find is that lots of companies right now are doing this mad dab and grab because they hear something in the market that sounds ooh shiny, and they think that that's going to help inform their strategy and to quiet the noise. So before you decide whether you want to build, buy, or integrate, I think you need an internal strategy that is aligned to what makes sense within your organizational culture. Secondly, I personally don't think you should build. And the reason why I don't think you should build is because there's not enough expertise even among large tech providers around what's going to be sustainable in terms of really making progress in the diversity narrative and the outcomes. And so you could spend hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if you aren't a diversity practitioner that is deep in the understanding of what you're doing, your organization makes widgets. Don't turn your attention from making widgets to building a piece of tech, right? There's many options in organizations where you have people who are focused on the work, doing the right kind of research, can tell you the outcomes. And so my recommendation would be to build, to buy, and then where you can buy, integrate it in and see how it aligns with current systems so you get maximum utilization. But again, buy tech that makes sense for your organization at a budget level that you can sustain beyond this amplified time of increased budgets because people want to make progress.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Rocki. Like, not look at externally, but look at internally first, and then then make the choices.
Absolutely. Shrikant, can I comment on that? Because I really
go ahead.
It's not a bias because we have a solution, but it's really the solution that if companies choose to buy, which I totally agree, because focus on what they're good at. If this is their space, then great, focus on it. But if they're building widgets, focus on widgets, focus on your strengths. And so for us, our strength is that we bring the best content that exist in this space out there. Consider us the Netflix for D&I. We bring the best content that exists, and we curate in a way where it's sustainable and worth coming back to on a daily basis. But to that point around, for an organization to embrace, we allow organizations to embrace their content as well, because organizations inherently have content. They just have it in places that nobody's going to. They have a lot of good stuff. It's just hard to find. So this platform, if you're going to use a technology solution, which we provide, the opportunity to integrate your existing company content in addition to what exists outside the offices. So you get the best of both worlds. You hear what's happening on the outside world in this space, and you hear what's happening internally in your organization. Some organizations pride themselves in their mission, and in the D&I space, we hear the awards and the recognitions, and I'll always do a little wink when I see those recognitions. But at the end of the day, you can go inside organization culture and really find out what's going on. Are they getting, going back to your point, Shrikant, this analytics component? Let's look at their numbers. What is their retention of their employees? Yeah, we know you're hiring, but how many people are staying? What's your percentage of your organization that are made up from a demographic standpoint? Those are all metrics. But if your technology solution doesn't come with metrics, then I think you're missing the mark as well. We bring metrics because we want to know where people want to know that they're investing their time to learn this stuff. And they want to be recognized because it goes back to the one principle with them. What's in it for me? Every employee thinks that. We all think that. So this topic around D&I, it's all built on with them. What am I going to get? So if everybody's coming in with what am I going to get, then the technology has to show that if you do what's good and what's right, you're going to be retained. You're going to feel like you're part of the solution. You're going to be ultimately part of the belonging, and you're going to be part of helping that company succeed. So that's my view on, on this space. But companies should look to buy. There's a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thoughts like buying seems to be, unless you are somebody wanting to be invested in that space and make a product yourself, it doesn't make sense for you to build anything. But it's more like buy and then integrate in the best possible way.
Absolutely.
So great points. Moving on to our final segment of today about which technology. I don't know whether my share is working. Let me just see. I think I missed it. Okay. Switching screens. Okay. So I think it's back. It's sharing. So the final part, I think the key aspect, we talked about analytics briefly, and that being one of the key drivers when it comes to the D&I initiatives and touching it strategically. But the whole AI and the emergence over the last 3-4 years and the number of products out there who are that's leveraging AI and analytics is probably going to power the whole DI adoption and make it better for organizations to be able to do this at a pace that they want. They'll see results, and they will probably be able to measure what the impact is. Whereas otherwise, in the previous days, it probably may have been a lot harder to measure what the outcomes are. Just a very tangent story that when I was putting together the slide that came to my mind was two years back or 3 years back, I heard a podcast where they were talking about using AI to remove the bias of how somebody gets bail. So if you are charged with something, and if you don't have money to pay for bail, you probably have to go to jail. And it was a system that's out there for many years, and it was kind of biased towards people who have money. And the whole AI concept there was proposed to make sure that the money bias is taken out, and it's more based on data, whether you get a bail or not, and characteristics. So, of course, it can have its own challenges, it can have its own problems, but similarly, I think in all aspects, when it comes to a person's life within a workplace, D&I and the technology, the way they connect together, plays a big part in how he or she feels belonged in the organization. And I think it's important as technologists that we keep that aspect in mind when we are designing things, so that we use the right balance about with human as well as technology. And some of this technology is really enabling us to move things faster. So on that note, I would probably post my last question to both our panelists is the emerging tech really moving the needle? And or there are some benefits, of course, but if you can also throw lights on some challenges that you may have seen that we should be wary of when adopting some of this new technology, that would be great. So starting with Rocki.
Yeah, I think what we need to be able to do is we have to understand that we're going to make progress with technology and the tools will be flawed. And so to assume that you're going to start using technology and not to have that align with human intervention to understand the actual outcomes and to see if the outcomes are working or if they're having an adverse impact. You don't want to just go, oh, they sold me this, so I'm going to plug it in, I'm going to assume it works and let it go. Let me use a good example that's top of mind for us right now. It is the concept of blind resumes, right? So you use blind resumes and, we've all heard that, removing and redacting certain parts or pieces of a person's resume to reduce bias might actually reduce bias. And this is the way to go, right? And, this sounds logical to me. This to me as a diversity practitioner and as someone who's lived in communities where I could actually see the bias happening. Right. So, if your name is a culturally clear name, sometimes the bias is clear. People will skip over your resume because, they can't pronounce your name or they have a bias as to what community you come from. So it would seem smart that we remove the name and then that takes the bias away. Human beings are still human beings. And so now there's research that is starting to come out that says what's actually happening is instead of getting increases in diversity hiring because we're using this redacted technology, it's actually having a reverse impact. Yeah. So I personally, what we've committed to our clients is that we're going to do deep dive and we're going to do the research and we're going to make recommendations based on research and outcomes. But I think it's really careful, like that's the pro and that's the con, right? Is it should reduce certain bias, but is it then having an adverse impact on people as well? We need to look at that. When we think about AI, this is why representation matters. Okay. Well, I see it in pictures all the time, right? And so if AI doesn't, let's take a step back. If representation isn't part of the community that helped build the actual AI, are there biases that are actually part of the AI? So that's a question. Right. And so I think especially as underrepresented groups, if those underrepresented groups are at the table, can we make sure that the AI is not being biased? Right. And that goes back to the comment that was made before. So I think, again, now here's the truth. The other side of that is the AI going to be any more biased than Rocki Howard sitting there with her human biases and the multiple conscious and unconscious biases that go through my mind. Right. I don't know where that sits and ends, but I think it's a constant evolution of us saying, okay, I understand how this tech can be here and support. We use AI within our technology to say, okay, here is a job. Here are the qualifications. Let me automate the process of seeing if these qualifications are here and score it. But we tell you not to use that with blinders on. Use that as a way, as part of your process, and then use human intervention to then validate that.
Right.
Thanks, Rocki. That makes a lot of sense of how you are doing it at SmartRecruiters and what your recommendations are. Everton, your take on this?
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with Rocki's view. Clearly, from a recruiting standpoint, an AI is human bias built algorithm. So if there's a bias in the programming, there will be a bias in the outcome. We know that. So that human element has to complement whatever the artificial component is to that decision or that programming. So I think Rocki touched on that. What I like to talk about is just more on the analytics front, the data. We've got a lot of interesting data that points to some key information, and there's been lots of market research in this space of D&I. And you know, it goes without question that are people looking at the data? Some do. You know, we're here. We probably know the data speaks. But if organizations really want their data to be, you know, part of their change, which is really all of what it boils down to is change management here, they need to grab that data and they need to benchmark themselves across that data and then to see where they move over time. Where that stickiness sticks is where it goes back down. If you're a business, it goes back to that leadership and it goes back to tied to compensation. So for me, if any of this stuff is even worth talking about, unless leadership is accountable for this space and not just the chief diversity officer or the chief HR officer, but if you're a leader and you're getting a bonus or you're getting a raise, if D&I is not part of your mission to be embraced, or you're not going to change the dynamics, then your compensation is going to be impacted. We know what gets measured gets done. And organizations are built for one thing. We all know, stay in business. Profit drives it. This is not a charitable discussion. We're not here to talk about social things. We're here to talk about business things. Organizations are built for business. And I think if this space and this conversation we're having with these platforms that exist, I'm sure there will be others that will come along much better than what we have today. In the future, there'll be new ones. But for today, you know, I think we have some good stuff, you know, worth considering. But I think it goes back to, we cannot lose sight of we're human beings here, guys. And we're not trying to get closer to machines. We're trying to get closer to each other.
Thanks, Everton. That's a great perspective of summarizing. And I think the data analytics angle that you brought in and rewarding people for you know, furthering DEI within the organizations is definitely, you know, probably going to be, we're going to see it in performance reviews and other key aspects. It's going to be measured now that there is data analytics, so it will be measured so people can be rewarded, and organizations, you know, can embrace it more holistically and at a faster pace. So yeah, that completes the discussion for today. I have just a couple of more slides. One was to just give you a quick summary of what we discussed today. Primarily, we talked about the emerging DEI space and what's happening, how it's getting disrupted because of the social and business drivers. And we heard Everton and talk about some of those as well. And overall, when we took this concept of how organizations are approaching DEI technology, we started with this thing about build, buy, and integrate. But seems like what Rocki and Everton are alluding to is buy and integrate. But before that, look internally what your strategy is, and then buy based on that, and then use integration as one of the ways to make sure that you have the right DEI approach. And finally, AI and analytics, use it in the products, look at how products are delivering that to you. But at the same time, don't forget to make sure that the human intervention is there, so that, you know, if the software is biased in some way, if the data is biased in some way, you are catching that and not just relying entirely on the data, but make improvements in those areas. So that was a quick summary of entire session. Very quickly about Harbinger Group. We've been we provide services to the HR, learning, and healthcare product companies. We also do a lot of content development services. And we have some of our own products and tools that we sell and OEM with with other product companies. So if you're interested to know more, feel free to reach out to me or to any of our colleagues, my colleagues Seema and Bhagyashree here. Any further details about Harbinger. On that note, let me open it up for questions and thank Rocki and Everton for sharing their views and thought process, and also spending the time with us on this interesting discussion. So open for questions. We still have about, I think, Angela, we still have time?
Yes, we have 9 minutes left. I haven't given the 5-minute warning, so we'll definitely agree. Open it up to questions to everyone, to the panel, to our wonderful panel.
Yeah, hi, this is Thomas Abraham here. I'm based out of India. And thank you so much, Shrikant, Rocki, and Everton for that fantastic, discussion. But, I have a very fundamental question, which is that, I guess, the challenge that most corporations face is really around, the thought process of the leadership and the fundamental culture that exists in the organization. So you may have any amount of technology which can perhaps facilitate, the wonderful things that we've sort of, discussed in the last hour or so. But, if the leadership, the thought process and the culture doesn't change, then all this would actually fall by the wayside. So what's really happening, and I'd like to hear, because all of you are the experts, what's really happening to shape the thought process of leadership on an ongoing basis? Because it cannot be a one-time intervention, because if someone has a very fixed mindset, then to change his or her perception would really take a long time. So, what's really happening from that perspective, and can technology play a role at all there? Because I think, to my mind, that's really the sort of building block for ensuring, adoption of DEIB.
So I'm going to lead that.
Thomas, for that question. Rocki, go ahead.
I want to lead with that because I fundamentally believe that diversity cannot exist in cultures that have vacuums of equity, inclusion, and belonging. Right. And this is why I continue to say, and why I led with Thomas, this is not a tech problem. Tech cannot solve your leaders' values issues, right? And let's just be really honest. Diversity is messy. It's the only business proposition where people's personal values are challenged and shame and guilt is involved. And most of us are in a generation where we were taught all of our lives never to talk about race, politics, sex, religion at work. And now all of a sudden we're supposed to be experts at facilitating those conversations. Right. And so this is one of the reasons why we build organizational accountability into our model. So when our clients ask us about how do we resolve the issue, we build organizational accountability into it. Because here's what I think the challenge is. You have one or two challenges. The more popular challenge I see is that there's someone above the glass ceiling in the C-suite, your CEO, you're someone over here that really believes in diversity and really wants to see it thrive in the organization, right? And that's above the C-suite. The problem is that the culture and the processes and the systemic challenges happen below the C-suite. And what we haven't done is, look, diversity doesn't belong to me as a CDO. It doesn't belong to anyone that's a CEO. It belongs to everyone in the organization. The challenge is, Angela's given us the 5-minute warning because she knows I'm up on a pulpit right now and I'm about to preach, right?
Oh, preach, Rocki, go ahead.
Rock on. The challenge is that we don't teach people what that means. We don't tell, Michelle, the receptionist, that here's her job and the part that she plays in our culture. We don't tell our middle managers that. I fundamentally believe, I saw the company, the comment about Pepsi. I fundamentally believe every business problem we've solved is it because it's been tied to performance review and bonus payout. It expedites everybody, whether you personally buy into it or not. And then there does have to be a continuous education platform, which is why I am a friend of Diversitypops, because nudge training works. And you can't do this compliance related training where you bring somebody in and you show them a policy and you show them a video and they sign it and you go, okay, now we're diverse. That doesn't work. And you can't do it once a year. There needs to be a holistic strategy about training people at each level of the organization, coming up with a common language that is aligned to your strategy in your organization, and then providing them with ongoing training about how to continue to evolve that. When we started that at SmartRecruiters, we literally started with training every people leader that we had in the organization. And then we got them involved as a workshop to say, all right, what are you going to commit to? You now know what inclusive leadership means. We've done this together. So together, we're going to decide what our commitments are. And what this means is every employee can call you out and hold you accountable to these behaviors, and we will too. And now this also sets the stage for when we're looking at the right level of leader to come into this organization. If they're not willing to buy into these commitments, they don't belong at SmartRecruiters, right? This is a systemic issue. It's a hearts and minds issue, and we have to approach it from all of those things. And we have to have people understand. I also hear bias training doesn't work. It's because we try to do it one and done. We say, here's the 10 biases, the most common biases, and here you are, and be aware of it. That's never going to work. Okay, I'm going to get off the pulpit now because I could talk about this for hours. But
Yeah.
Tom, tech is not going to solve this problem, love.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks, Rocki. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Rocki. Great points, I think, on that. And thanks, Thomas, for that interesting question.
All right, we've got 2 minutes left. Any other questions?
Just expressing my gratitude for this discussion and the amazing thought process that is in this room, and thinking about how and in what ways can we formally and informally bring this into our community and to our world, into our ecosystem.
Thank you, MPH.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for, creating this group and session.
Thank you.
We
Indeed.
appreciate it.
And with that, would like to just say thank you so much to Shrikant for bringing this wonderful panel together and for pulling together a great discussion. And of course, thank you so much to our panelists, to Rocki and to Everton, for everything that you've shared. It's been a lively conversation going back and forth in the chat here. So we thank you for your time and for sharing your opinions and your expertise. So with
Thanks.
that,